Ohashi Ringo, the first and youngest of all the seven prodigies, is a world-renowned inventor and innovator. The second youngest, Ichigo Aoi, is an excellent swordsman who can dodge bullets and strike with acute preciseness. Next up is the best surgeon the world has ever produced, Kanzaki Keen. The fourth person is a money magnate, a dude who has a foot in about 30% of the entire world's monetary trades, Sanada Masato. The illusionist and talented magician, Prince Akatsuki, is the fifth most talented prodigy. Sarutobi Shinobu is a world top journalist. Finally, Mikogami Tsukasa takes up the title of the seventh space of the world's best and youngest politician after he was elected to be Prime Minister of Japan following a vote from the heads. One day, fate brought all seven prodigies together in a plane as they all traveled to Japan. Unfortunately, one of the plane's engines malfunctions and it crash lands in another world. Efforts to find the debris and remains of the seven prodigies in the real world have been futile, as the rescue team found no traces of the crash. Several days passed by with no news about the plane or the seven prodigies. A few days after the crash, Tsukasa wakes up in a local inn sleeping beside the other six prodigies. The last thing he remembers were moments before the plane crashed. He finds a weird girl with animal-like ears and a tail attending to him and asks her about the others. She tells him they're doing just fine. The girl introduces herself as Lerul and tries to give Tsukasa some goat meat stew. Tsukasa has trouble eating, so she decides to chew the food and put it in his mouth by kissing him. Tsukasa appreciates her kindness and lips and asks her to do more of such. Lerul keeps doing the same thing until the innkeeper, Winona, interrupts them and introduces herself. Tsukasa notices her tail and ears and asks her if they're real. At that moment, Tsukasa was still confused about the world they're in. He asks Lerul and Winona about their weird anatomy, and they tell him they're Buma. Just then, it clicks in Tsukasa's head that the crash had brought them to another world. He tells the ladies they may be in another world and asks them to take him to the crash site. On getting there, he finds how bad the state of the plane is. They should never have survived the crash at all. While he thinks about the odds of something like this happening, a dragon flies by and confirms his suspicions. They're definitely in another world. 1 month later, with all the prodigies now up and running, the village hosts a party in their honor. The seven prodigies are more than happy to be celebrated by the village, all except Keen, who's still having trouble accepting their new reality. Tsukasa proposes to the prodigies that they research the possibility of them having magic in this new world they're in. The others nod in agreement. Up next, the prodigies introduce the greatest condiment, mayonnaise, to the new world. Everyone gets a taste of the mayonnaise and enjoys it greatly. Winona tells them a story about 7 heroes who came and saved their world from tyrants several years ago, but her son, Elch, steps in and writes off her story. As it turns out, her son isn't so fond of the prodigies. After the party, Tsukasa arranges a meeting and announces their 3 missions in this new world they're in. First, they need to gather information from the new world. Next, they have to find a way back to the real world. And thirdly, they need to pay the village back for their kindness. The others concur to this plan and get on with it. The next day, Ringo repairs everyone's phone and recovers the mini nuclear reactor she made back in the real world. This would be a good power source for her new research. She also finds some bauxite ore and mines it for aluminum. Later that day, some soldiers harass Winona and the villagers. Tsukasa steps in and defends her from the perverts. The soldiers draw out their swords to fight the prodigies. However, they're brought down in a matter of minutes. The soldiers run away with their tail in between their legs and promise to report to the king. On their way back, however, Akatsuki stops them and makes sure they never tell the king about any of the events that happened in the village. When he's back, Tsukasa reignites the spirits in his colleagues and tells them to begin their missions. A few days later, Masato and Elch visit the New Chillin Mega Merchant Company to get some stocks for the village to survive during the winter. The merchant, Jakoi, who heads the New Chillin Merchant Company, values the goods at extravagant prices and forces Elch and Masato to leave the company. Masato gets so angry that this inspires him to start his own new merchant company. He makes a promise to Elch that he'll bring down the Jakoi's merchant company in just 1 week and teach him how to make money. Elch tells him it's physically impossible to do so, but Masato tells him to watch him. Meters away from them, a homeless young Buma listens in on their conversation. Akatsuki does some magic tricks in front of the kids and wows them. One of the village women thanks Tsukasa greatly for their help in the entire village. Tsukasa tells her they're just doing their best to repay them for their kindness. She tells him about their dwindling supplies and wonders what the best course of action would be. Tsukasa tells her not to worry as Masato would find something to do about it. Winona interrupts them and tells them about the terrible merchant Jakoi who keeps hiking up prices of goods all year round. Tsukasa tells them to leave things in businessman Masato's hands. That evening, Masato acquired a permit to open his trading company from the mayor of the town. Elch is surprised he could pull off such a stunt in just 1 day. Shinobu arrives and tells Elch she had a hand in helping out as well. She leaves them shortly and goes her own way. While they prepare to leave, the homeless kid stalking from earlier reveals herself as Rue and begs Masato to accept her under his wing. She wishes to learn the ropes around marketing and business from the man himself. Masato sees the greed in her eyes and agrees to teach her the ways of business. He gets her better clothes and gets to his next meeting with some small merchants around town. There, he proposes they come sell their goods in their shopping plaza and pay them a little percentage of their sales as rent. He also lists out more terms favorable to the merchants, and they accept the deal. Once the merchants are gone, Elch asks Masato if he's good with earning money without doing a thing. Masato tells him to wait and watch the big things happen. The next day, Masato finds a site for their mall and builds a makeshift shopping mall closer to residential access for easier access by the people. Almost immediately, the mall begins filling up with merchants. Masato tells his apprentices it's time for the hard part. Now they have to make sure the merchants make sales so they can have money to pay them. They stay in the stalls and wait for the customers to come. Some hours later, people begin to notice the mall. They see how cheap the prices are and decide to try buying stuff. Soon, the whole mall is filled with people buying different stuff. Shinobu calls Masato to give an update on Jakoi's dirty business. He tells her to arrange some carts so they can transport supplies to the village. That evening, the village begins filling with supplies and everyone is happy once again. Jakoi hears the news of the new mall that opened up around town, but he's neither worries nor threatened that they'll overtake him. The very next day, Masato puts up some mayonnaise for sale. The townsfolk love the new stuff and buy all of it before the day ends. Later on, the captain of the merchant fleet, Sea Serpent, visits the shopping mall to try out their mayonnaise. Unfortunately, there's none for sale. Masato arranges a meeting to talk business with the captain, which ends on a good note. The next day, the captain makes a deal with Masato. On the night of the second day, Elch and Rue sit on a cart full of gold coins as they just made a fortune in a few days. Shinobu visits them and tells Masato that Jakoi plans to build another market in the central plaza to take back his customers. The next day, Ringo finishes her new aluminum alloy shovels. She shows them to Tsukasa, who commends her efforts. They then continue talking about Masato. Tsukasa tells Ringo about Masato's resourcefulness and reassures her they would do all it takes to get her what she needs for her projects. After their meeting, Tsukasa returns to the village only to find out it's already snowing. In the meantime, Jakoi finally starts seeing Masato's shopping mall as a threat to his business. He orders his men to buy all the goods the merchants have for sale, so Masato won't have any goods to trade with. Unfortunately for him, Masato already thought ahead. He had brought the traders to his side and had given them contracts relieving them of the horrible tariffs imposed on their goods by Jakoi. Jakoi gets the shock of his life when he finds out he's completely out of business. He tries to buy the merchants back, but it's already too late for him. Jakoi has no choice but to bow down to Masato now that his business is at risk of bankruptcy. Still, Masato refuses to throw him under the bus. Instead, he invites Jakoi to work under him this time. Jakoi has no choice but to join him. After their victory, Masato plays with Rue by the seaside. Elch asks him why he didn't do away with Jakoi. Masato tells him he needs his enemies closer to him. Just then, some slave traders pass by and recognize Rue as their slave. They confront Masato for harboring a slave that's not his and hold her back. Rue walks over to Masato and promises him to be a better merchant and make lots of money to buy her parents back. She begs Masato to buy her from the slave traders and teach her the ways to make money. Moved by her confidence, Masato buys Rue for 100 times the price. Rue tears up and thanks her new boss for saving her life. Hours later, Tsukasa gets the good news from Shinobu on a call. Masato's new mall is doing extremely well. She talks further on some of the information she was able to gather in the city and tells him about the magic capabilities of this new world, including how to use it to their advantage. Before hanging up, she tells him she wasn't able to get information about the 7 heroes of the world as the information about them was destroyed. Tsukasa tells her they have to search for it by all means. While on the call, the villagers finish building the first bathhouse of the village. They take a bath in the pool for a while until someone comes bearing bad news. A few hunters from the village ran into a monster during their evening hunt in the forest. Everyone puts on their clothes and runs to the scene. Masato and his apprentices join them to go look for the villagers in trouble. Luckily for the hunters, Aoi the samurai takes the monster out before it could do more harm. While she fights the monster, the others rescue Mayor Olga, who is hit and bleeding everywhere. In the meantime, Keen takes out her surgical instruments and begins working on saving Olga's life. She works her magic and revives Olga right in front of everyone. When they're back to the mall, the captain of Marcus Findle's Guardian Knights, Inzaghi, arrives at the shopping mall and accuses Masato of making money through illegal means. Even though this is a wrong accusation, the 7 prodigies have no choice but to allow Izanagi to carry out the king's will. Izanagi and his soldiers set the mall on fire despite having people still inside and leave shortly. The other villagers worry what may happen to the people inside the mall, but Ikatsuke uses his magic illusions to bring them out of danger. Once they're all gathered up, Tsukasa finds out Leirul is missing. After searching their small crowd, Tsukasa and the villagers conclude that Leirul has been abducted while they were saving their families from the fire. Elch proposes they take the fight to Dorman and seize their freedom from his fat hands. However, Tsukasa advises they try a more diplomatic approach to things. He tells the people the dangers they stand to face from making rash decisions and fears the village may bear the brunt of the aftermath. However, when Anna steps in and tells him they have no choice but to stand up and fight for their land and freedom, Tsukasa reasons with her logic and changes his bias. He, however, tells the villagers that things may get bloody, and they may start a war by rebelling against the Empire. However, the people tell him they're ready to face the results of their actions. Tsukasa offers the people their help and informs them that they'll be making new inventions to help protect them from the knight's weapons. In a large castle, Inzagi dresses Leirul up in a sultry manner and presents her to the leader of Dormant so he can use her to satisfy his desires. When she gets to the king's chambers, Leirul has to bear the disgust of making out with a fatso. The fatso fondles her chest a little bit and goes in for a kiss. Just as his lips are about to touch Leirul's, a strong spark separates them both. The fatso finds out Leirul is a sorcerer, so he orders Inzagi to tie her up. In the meantime, Tsukasa and his army of villagers had already gotten to the gates of the castle. Ringo uses her futuristic cannonball to blast a hole in the castle walls, paving a path for the villagers to cross. Inzagi, upon sighting the villagers, orders his men to shoot them down with arrows. However, their strong duralumin shields protect all of them with 0 casualties. The press went further deep into the castle and took out all of Inzagi's 200 men with the help of the 7 prodigies. Tsukasa and Shinobu sneak past the gates to get to Leirul. As they get into the inner chambers, they meet the Imperial Mage officer, Gale Stafford, who acts as an obstacle to keep them from entering. Outside, Akatsuki flies tall and high in the sky, ready to terrorize the soldiers of Dormant with his magic. He spreads some poison bombs on the soldiers and gets them running with their tails in between their legs. Inside, Shinobu evades all of the mage's attacks and knocks him down with her ninja art. Just then, Inzagi rushes towards them with 2 other men and confronts the duo. Shinobu buys Tsukasa some time to go find Leirul. After checking out a few rooms, he finally finds Leirul tied up in the king's bedroom. Unknown to him, the king was already hiding somewhere and ready to attack. The fat king takes out his handgun and shoots Tsukasa down. Then he removes his knife and cuts out Leirul's clothes. Tsukasa stands up and reveals that he was wearing a bulletproof vest all along. He takes out his own handgun and shoots the fatso in the brains. Don't worry though, they're just rubber bullets, so it doesn't make a mess. After taking out the king, Tsukasa releases Leirul from the ropes and tries to wake her up. However, something weird happens as Leirul's eyes turn blue. She speaks in a weird tone. The thing speaking inside her calls Tsukasa and the prodigies the 7 light faith heroes and tells him to save the world from the giant dragon trying to swallow the entire world. Once the message is delivered, Leirul wakes up in Tsukasa's arms crying happily. The battle ends in the villagers' favor. They let out a cry of victory as they just got their freedom back. A few days after their victory, the 7 prodigies build a large van for their shows. In the opening scene, they unveil their van in front of a large audience and host a magic show in it. The 7 prodigies present Akatsuki as a god sent from the heavens to protect their land. Following Akatsuki's magic performance, they present several bowls of mayonnaise and give them out to the people for free. Everyone rushes to grab a bowl of the delicious condiment. After giving out the mayonnaise, Akatsuki continues his magic show and woos his audience. Tsukasa and Masato talk about the new alliance they just formed. They name themselves the 7 Light Faith. Meanwhile, Elch and Shinobu make their way through the thick snow to get to Buchwald Kingdom to find out all they can about the place. After his second magic show, the 7 prodigies hand out more mayonnaise to the villagers. By nightfall, Tsukasa sneaks into the royal castle to see the mayor Hazeret discuss and merge with him. After negotiating all the terms for the alliance, Hazeret agrees to form an alliance with the 7 Light Faith, all while serving as the mayor of Dormant. The next day, Hazeret announces his alliance with the 7 Light Faith to the people. The guards are low-key happy about the alliance, but they dare not show it. That night, all 7 prodigies assemble for a meeting to talk about the new state of affairs. Tsukasa tells them to get back to the village while he oversees things here in Dormant. Keen, the doctor, makes a special request for some capital and manpower to build an antibiotic factory for the people. Tsukasa nods in agreement and urges tasks to the other prodigies. Masato asks Tsukasa about choosing a new leader for their new alliance. Tsukasa tells him he has someone in mind. After the meeting, Tsukasa gets to the pub around town to meet with the current captain of the Silver Knights, Zes Bernard. Tsukasa asks the captain to become the new leader of his alliance, but Bernard tells him he's quit being a knight starting from that day. When asked why, he says he fears getting caught in the crossfire when the Empire finally decides to attack the 7 Light Faith. Tsukasa gets back home and gets more inspired to talk to Bernard again. The next day, Tsukasa visits Bernard in his house. This time, he finds him playing with his daughter. He uses his daughter to conjure up a speech to change Bernard's mind. After delivering a long speech to Bernard, he finally agrees to be the head of the knights. That evening, Tsukasa finds some nobles opposing the alliance. He ignores them and keeps on walking. Elsewhere, Shinobu dresses as an escort and gets information about Butchward from the knights in the pub. She finds out about Duke Kristov, the Lord of Kristov, who is a perfectionist and the Emperor's war general. Shinobu gets home and informs Elch about the Duke. Now they have to get to Gustav and find more information about the Duke. In the final scene, Gustav beheads one of his knights for his failure to capture one of the 7 Light Faith members. Then he pledges and promises to find the rebels himself and put an end to them. A few days later, after forming alliances with major leaders of the kingdom, Tsukasa begins implementing reforms and rules to fit the new change in leadership. One night after work, his subordinate asks Tsukasa why he's always busy and never sleeps. Tsukasa laughs and reassures his man that he sleeps just fine. The following morning in the village, Ulda makes a full recovery and gets bandaged up. He thanks Keen for her help in reviving him and laughs with his daughter Winona again. Just then, Rue arrives all dehydrated and tired. Winona gives her some water to drink and asks her why she's going on a hunger strike. She tells them she's currently learning the multiplication tables that her boss asked her to learn. The adults play around with her and make her laugh for a little while. Elsewhere, Tsukasa and Masato oversee the production of machine tools and artilleries led by Ringo for their new alliance. Tsukasa tells Ringo he plans on building an aerial defense system so they can engage the Empire fighters in some aerial defense. Masato reminds him about the Emperor's infamous magic spell, the Heaven's Flames, which he used to take out countries and nations in the past. Tsukasa gets in his thoughts and wonders what they could do to counter that. Just then, Lerule arrives to deliver some food to the boys for their hard work. After giving them the food, she asks Tsukasa out for lunch. However, Tsukasa refuses to go out with her and heads off to his meeting. Lerule bursts into tears as she thinks Tsukasa doesn't like her. After he's gone, Masato tells her that Tsukasa has been avoiding her because he feels guilty for wanting to abandon her initially. That night, Tsukasa ends work for the day and dismisses his subordinate to get some rest. Now that he's alone in the room, his vision blurs as he gets super tired. Lerule shows up and knocks on his door. Tsukasa tries to push her away, but Lerule sees herself in. On getting inside, Lerule confronts him and asks for a reason why he hates her too much. Tsukasa tells her he doesn't hate anybody himself. Still, Lerule tells him she feels no hate for him. Tsukasa then decides to tell her the story of his life. He tells her he worked with the people who brought his father to his death after finding out, as a youngster, that his dad was very corrupt. Till that very day, his mother hates his guts and would do anything to bring her husband back to life. Tsukasa condemns himself for acting in such a way and tells Lerule that's the kind of man he is. Lerule cries softly out of sadness for Tsukasa's life. Tsukasa tells her he still doesn't regret ever doing such a thing as he strives to be a corrupt-free politician. Lerule walks closer to him and holds him close to her. She tells him she's never going to hate on him no matter how much he tries. Tsukasa gives in to her words and asks her permission to lay his head on her lap so he can sleep off for the first time in days. While Susaka sleeps, Ringo, who's been eavesdropping on them the entire time, leaves for her office to cool off. Apparently, she has a crush on Tsukasa. The next day, Akatsuki is accompanied by 2 ladies in the bathhouse. He tries every trick in his book to keep the ladies away from him, but nothing works. He finds Rue all sullen and sad as she couldn't learn the multiplication tables in time. Akatsuki, Aoi, and Keen give her some pointers on how to learn something quickly. Rue leaves the bathhouse happier and ready to learn the multiplication tables. Akatsuki asks her some questions about multiplication and she gets them all. After passing her multiplication test, the time comes for her to learn division. In the final scene, Rue stands and stares at 5 fishes, wondering how the hell she would go about learning division. Upon arriving at Gustav, the city of Duke Gustav, Elch and Shinobu visit an inn to rest from their long journey. The people of the town offer them various fattening foods for them to feast on. Shinobu and Elch make sure to eat and drink while they still can. The commoner waits till both travelers are drunk before showing their rooms to rest and sober up. The innkeeper's daughter, Melinda, silently warns Elch to leave the village while they still can. Her mom drags her downstairs with her and leaves Elch with Shinobu in the room. When they're gone, Shinobu puts off the act and sobers up immediately. She then walks over at Elch and kisses him so he becomes sober. When they're back to normal, she tells Elch that something's suspicious. The people kept encouraging them to eat without even touching the food themselves. She gets up and takes Elch to the inn's basement. There, they find mutilated bodies of former travelers all skewered up and hung in the air. This could only mean the commoners were cannibals. The emergency alarm sounds just then and the commoners step outside to get inspected by Silver Knight, Jean du Leblanc. Everyone assembles and greets the Imperial Knights. Jean checks everyone and ensures that they're all spotless and clean. Then she dismisses them. Just before Melinda and her mom are gone, Jean spots some dirt on Melinda's dress. She calls her back and orders her soldiers to flog her as punishment for being dirty. Elch and Shinobu, who were watching from their room, decide to help the little girl out. Shinobu tells Elch to call home and tell them she's been captured. She then steps out and offers herself to be captured on the condition that the guards stop punishing Melinda for being a child. Shinobu's captured, stripped, and imprisoned in the dungeons. That evening, Jean visits her and orders the guards on duty to leave immediately. In the meantime, Melinda's mother thanks Elch for helping her daughter out. Elch sees through the BS and asks her about the horrible things he saw in the basement. Melinda's mom bursts into tears and tells them they had no choice but to do that to survive. Ever since Gustave had become their leader and enforced his always clean rule, the people of Gustave have had to stop plowing the fields and growing their own food in fear of getting dirty. Their food supply dwindled over time and they were forced to eat people. Elch feels sorry for her and decides to help her. Jean surprisingly releases Shinobu from her chains and asks for her help in defeating Gustave. Apparently, she hid the man's OCD guts and wanted him gone. Shinobu decides to help her out. In the king's castle, Duke Gustave is seen admiring a new golden statue of the emperor his people just built. He tells his subordinate to begin constructing 3 more statues to honor their emperor. The man warns him that procuring more gold may cause the town to go into further despair. However, Duke doesn't care at all. He asks him about their attack on Findolf, but the subordinate tells him they plan on attacking them after the winter. The Duke gets very angry at their sluggish means of attack and gets to his basement. There he takes out his spear of fire, Lage Soleil, and prepares to launch it at Findolf. Leroux, while working, suddenly stops and hears voices in her head warning her about a dangerous force coming at the 7 Light Faith heroes. Gustave launches the spear at rapid speeds towards the village. Almost immediately, Ringo's systems pick up the UFO coming towards them. Her calculations predict the point of impact to be Findolf. She immediately deploys anti-air missiles, but they don't work at all. Tsukasa tells Ringo to keep firing the missiles, hoping they'll deflect the spear towards the ocean. Ringo tries this, but the spear dodges all the missiles. Eventually, it lands in the village and begins its destruction. Almost immediately after landing in the village, the fiery spear manifests itself into a burning knight and begins his attack on the village. Tsukasa tells his subordinates to remain calm while he dishes out tasks for them to carry out if they want the village to be saved. Almost immediately, the officials begin procuring all the necessary things needed to put out the fire. Meanwhile, Bernard finds some nobles trapped in the burning street and rescues them. The nobles ask him why he saved them. Bernard tells them he's only fighting for a future where everyone is equal. The attack on the village continues as 5 out of the 7 prodigies arrive on the scene. While they think of how to stop the fires, Lage Soleil releases trapped spirits and spreads them into the village. These spirits manifest and take the form of humanoid burning zombies. Then they begin touching and burning everybody. Tsukasa evacuates all those left unharmed from the fire and takes them to a ruin just outside the city. There, Leroux rushes towards them and tells them about a way to destroy Lage Soleil. If they could destroy the spear's lance, the curse on the spirits would be dispelled and all the trapped spirits would be freed once again. Leroux freaks out as she herself doesn't understand how she got to know such stuff. Tsukasa thanks her and explains his new plan to Ringo. Since the spirits bound the spear are now scattered around the city, they stand a better chance of destroying the spear now. This only leaves one thing: with so much fire burning around the spear, any missiles targeting system is sure to fail and get thrown off track. If only they could get a system that could get the missile close enough to hit the lance. There's a deafening silence and Aoi, the samurai, volunteers to redirect the missile towards the lance. Tsukasa lets her up as they all have no choice now. Aoi covers herself in cold water and gets ready for the missile launch. When Ringo launches the missile, Aoi runs along with it, holding it and using the missile's fuel as thrust to increase her speed. Aoi shows incredible strength and stability as she redirects the missile away from all the obstacles until she gets close enough to let it go. Lage Soleil notices something coming for him, so he deploys all the countermeasures he can to ensure that the missiles don't hit him. Unfortunately for him, Aoi is a samurai one shouldn't mess with at all. She successfully redirects the missile and destroys Lage Soleil. Back in the castle, Gustave gets a share of the damage done to the lance and loses his 2 arms. The spirits who were trapped in the lance are finally free to go and rest in peace. They thank the 7 Light Faith warriors and ascend into the heavens. Tsukasa gets his time alone with Leroux and tells her his missions for the village's future once again. He pledges to make sure such a disaster would never happen again. Leroux thanks him and tells him about the mysterious voice she heard in her head. She then suggests she starts learning magic so she can help Tsukasa out in her own way. Tsukasa gives her the go-ahead. The next day, the entire village erupts in joy for their victory over Lage Soleil. Shinobu calls Tsukasa and rants over the phone about missing all the fun the previous night. Tsukasa commends her for making an alliance with the Azure Brigade Resistance Force and urges to keep up the good work. Just then, Masato arrives to talk to his buddy. Tsukasa tells him about Leroux's epiphany and wonders what to do about it. While they discuss, Bernard arrives with his new modernized army of 50 men fully equipped with artillery and guns. After losing his arms, Gustig replaces them with fiery ones and instructs his subordinate Oscar to assemble all 10,000 troops and march towards Findolf all at once. This is great news for the 7 Light Faith warriors, as they know Gustav was now impatient and easier to take down in that state. A few hours after the decree is made, the Gustav's soldiers ride through the snowy mountains to get to Findolf all at once. The captain, Marquis Arclide, explains his disappointment in Gustav for making such a hasty decision and attacking the Seven Light Faith head-on. Unknown to them, Bernard and his soldiers had already sighted the front lines from their fort. He orders his men to shoot down some men to strike fear in Arclide's mind. This plan works and Arclide retreats, just like Tsukasa and Bernard predicted. Bernard orders his men to begin pursuing Bernard and his men. Arclide sees through this and does things to make Bernard think they were retreating for real. He plans to capture Bernard and his men in the plain fields around Buchwald with his heavy cavalry. This plan works, but unfortunately for him, this was all part of the grand plan. Bernard keeps a straight face and takes out the heavy cavalry with hand grenades just like Tsukasa had planned. Arclide retreats for real this time into Buchwald. Gustav, on the other hand, remains unfazed as gives his final speech to his troops before sending them off to war. The Azure Brigade begin their attack on Gustav and manage to turn all his soldiers against him. Ringo focuses her sights on Buchwald and sends her killer drones towards the city and demands the surrender of Buchwald to avoid being wiped out. Hours later, Gustav loses the remaining few men on his side and is pinned in his castle. Jean and Shinobu approach him and demand he surrender himself. Being the proud man he is, Gustav refuses to surrender. Instead, he levels up his power and uses his fiery arms to attack the girls. Jean and Shinobu manage to dodge most of his attacks in preparation for a counterattack. They get an opening after blinding Gustav in the eyes and make a move to behead him. Gustav sees through their trick and defends himself. Still, Jean gets to his blind spot and finally takes him down. As he bleeds out profusely, Gustav uses his own blood to create a self-destruct magic spell. Thankfully, Jean and Shinobu escape without getting hurt. Following the battle, the cities and villages begin rebuilding themselves. Marquis Arclide recognizes Tsukasa's wit and strength and decides to be on the winning team. He pledges his allegiance to the Seven Light Faith. A few days later, the ladies in the Seven Light Faith all enjoy sensual massages from the expensive aroma oils made for them by the Imperial mages. When it's Ringo's turn to get her neuro massage, she gets very shy due to her small stature. The girls recognize what's going on and help massage her chest region to lift her hopes up. Akatsuki also joins the ladies in their neuro massage and has a good time with them. When they're done, they present themselves to Tsukasa and Masato. On seeing Akatsuki in a girl's attire, the duo make fun of him. After the small talk, the Seven Light Faith heroes come together again. First, they discuss Leirul, who is currently learning the ropes around magic to become a mage. They keep discussing their alliance. Masato tells the group he's worried for the Azure Brigade as they may not be completely on their side just yet. Discussing further, Masato tells the group the Azure Brigade may just be recognizing the strength of the Seven Light Faith and are surrendering to avoid fighting a bigger foe while facing Gustav. Tsukasa butts in and tells them the lie Count Conrad told during their meeting. Tsukasa had asked him for the location of the golden statue of the Emperor. Conrad, however, lies about the location and tells him he doesn't know where it is. There's another thing they have to worry about. Is Gustav really dead? Well, they just have to wait and find out. In the meantime, they just have to find a way to bring the people of Azure to their side so they can render the brigade powerless. Before he gets to speak on his plan, Keen, the doctor, butts in and demands that Tsukasa and Ringo, the least rested member of the Seven Light Faith, take well-deserved breaks so they don't break down and fall sick. Tsukasa can't go against his doctor, so he thanks Keen for the advice and suspends their meeting for another busy day. He then asks Ringo, who's had a crush on him for a while now, to go on a date with him. Ringo gets home and tells her assistant. The assistant gets so happy for Ringo about her date. She tells Ringo to make the date count so Tsukasa gets to fall in love with her. Now Ringo has no knowledge on how to pull men to her side. She visits Aoi the samurai to get advice on how to act during the date. Aoi's explanation on the subject matter goes way out of line as she tells Ringo to seize Tsukasa by the balls and break him. Clearly she can't do such a thing. So Ringo visits Keen to hear her say on the matter. This time, Keen's approach is somewhat dangerous. She explains to Ringo a subtle way of graping a man. Ringo gets very surprised at the violent answers she's receiving. That evening, she hits the bathhouse and meets Shinobu there. After asking for her opinion, Shinobu tells her to go later than expected. The next day, Ringo makes sure to arrive at their meeting spot late. Tsukasa finds her hiding and calls to her. Ringo's face immediately goes red after seeing her crush. People also start flocking around them as they recognize them both as members of the Seven Light Faith. Firstly, Tsukasa takes Ringo to a clothing shop to change their clothes. After getting into new clothes, Ringo's face lights up red as Tsukasa appears cuter than ever. Tsukasa walks through town, turning women's heads. While they walk, Ringo remembers Shinobu's second tip, which is to hold her crush's hand when they walk together. To do this, Ringo decides to slip and fall into Tsukasa's hands. Tsukasa picks her up and takes her to a diner to eat lunch. There, Ringo remembers the third trick, which is the indirect kiss moment. Ringo tries her best but ends up switching wine cups with Tsukasa. Ringo faints shortly and recalls her younger times. Apparently, Ringo was the result of a genetic experiment her mother carried out on herself. A few years after being born, Ringo begins to solve heavy calculus and quantum equations. She received her first scientific award at age 6 and got it 3 times in a row. This made her mom jealous of her success and abandoned her later on. Ringo goes on to live her life like an orphan until she meets this strange boy from school. Tsukasa from that time would get spoiled electronics and give it to Ringo for repair. This went on and on until Ringo had to refuse fixing things for him. One day after school, Ringo finds Tsukasa at an electronics shop telling the owner he won't be able to fix his things anymore. She spectates the owner and Tsukasa talks about how talented she was. Just then, Ringo wakes up on Tsukasa's laps on a bench facing the ocean. She laughs and gets thankful she was able to get this close to the love of her life and be with him, even if the feelings seem one-sided. Ringo takes a selfie with Tsukasa and gets to smile again with the love of her life. She gets up and thanks Tsukasa for the date. Tsukasa accepts her thanks and makes a huge request from her to build something great. That night, Ringo gets back home and begins work on the project immediately. While Ringo works on the project, Tsukasa phones Shinobu to ask about the state of things at the Azure Brigade. Shinobu tells him that Conrad just left to see the Emperor to pledge his allegiance to the Empire. Tsukasa tells her to be very careful of the brigade members as one wouldn't know what they all had planned in store for the Seven Light Faith. The following day, the villagers fall victim to the deadly infection miasma. Now Keen's antibiotics should heal them up just nicely. However, she's run out of stock and wouldn't be able to produce more antibiotics to treat the villagers until the next batch is completed. Sorrentius, head of the medical guild in Gustav's nation, arrives with his minions and tries to sell opium, his dangerous new drug, as medicine to treat the miasma. He bashes the Seven Light Faith for failing to treat their own villagers and advises them to buy the drug he's marketing instead. Thankfully, Keen arrives just in time to stop them from selling such a drug to the villagers. She tells Sorrentius to give her a few days to come up with an entirely new drug to treat this plague. Sorrentius and men laugh at the impossibility of this happening and take their leave. Keen uses acupuncture to reduce the infected villagers' pain. Then she gets on with synthesizing the antimicrobial magic bullet drug, sulfonamide, with the help of Findolf's brand new mage, Lerule. In a matter of hours, Keen gets all the materials she would need to completely synthesize the magic bullet and successfully creates pink sulfonamide crystals from coal, sulfuric acid, and ammonia water, which smells like pee. When she's done, she administers the drug to the sick villagers and they get healed. Melinda's mother thanks the Seven Light Faith heroes for helping her daughter get healed up. Keen doesn't take up all the credit. Instead, she shares them with the other villagers. Sorrentius and his minions, after seeing the miracle happen, come up with an evil plan to poison the new medicine stock and kill some villagers just so Keen loses credibility. Luckily, Keen has been tracking them. She waits until they're done talking out their evil plans before she paralyzes their nerves with paralyzing medicine. Then she threatens the life out of Sorrentius and makes him promise never to do such a thing ever again. The next day, Sorrentius switches sides and promises to help Keen out with all her research. His minions are even surprised such a thing could happen, but they have no choice but to obey him. Elsewhere, Conrad faces General Nero to pledge his loyalty to the Emperor. Nero lets him know that, although he accepts his wishes to become one with the Empire again, the Seven Light Faith must go. Conrad says he'll do anything to let that happen. Nero smiles and presents a masked mage to serve under Conrad's disposal. The mage arrives and forges Lage Soleo right in front of everyone, striking fear into Conrad's heart. Nero places the mage under Conrad's disposal and tells him to take down the Seven Light Faith Knights. Ringo completes the new Tsukasa asteroid build. Tsukasa checks it out and explains some of his values to her before letting her go. In the next scene, Jeannie is seen making her prayers to the great statue of Count Bumhart. Razenak, one of the captains of the Knights, arrives with his guards and informs Jean of Conrad's rebellion. Jean suspects they may try to kill her then, so she attacks them hoping to escape. Unfortunately for her, Razenak's men were stronger. They pin her down and prepare to do vile acts on her before killing and disposing of her. Razenak leaves her to his men to enjoy. Just as they're about to begin their vile act, Shinobu arrives and saves Jean from the greatest embarrassment of her knighthood. Together, the two ladies work together to completely take Razenak down. Once they're out of danger, Shinobu takes Jean to the underground shelter of the Azure Brigade to show her Conrad's secret, a statue of the Emperor. Jean breaks down when she finds out Conrad was lying to her all this while. Shinobu offers her sanctuary with the Seven Light Faith and quickly hide as they hear Count Conrad approaching the shelter with the masked mage. Shinobu and Jean get to witness the masked mage reveal his true identity. After finding out Conrad broke the Emperor's golden statue, he gets very angry and reveals his true self so he can carry out his punishment on Conrad. The two ladies find out that the masked man is actually Gustav. Seems like he was brought back to life with some kind of red gem on his chest, which replaced his heart. He sees the two ladies hiding nearby and attacks them fully. Shinobu and Jean quickly get on horses and begin riding towards Findolf to warn the others of the impending danger. Unknown to them, Tsukasa had already fired the nuke towards Gustav's location. While the maniac proclaims his love for the Emperor, the nuke hits Azure's brigade and blows him up. Jean and Shinobu both watch the entire brigade grounds erupt in flames as the thunderbolt reduces it to ashes. Even the villagers from Findolf can see the cloud of fire far off in the horizon. Ringo and Tsukasa finishes up their work and toast to a new world of diplomacy and equality. Tsukasa tells Ringo they have to keep up their strength so they'll be able to keep running freely and fairly. Ringo gets very impressed and thanks Tsukasa dearly for being the true leader of the new world. The next day, Tsukasa is called upon to give a speech to the entire village and reignite their spirits. Tsukasa tells the village about their new alliance with the four great kingdoms of the north and also recounts their victory over their enemies the previous night. He then ends his speech by proposing to the people that they form a republican nation where everyone can make decisions for himself and don't have to bow completely to the nobles or become peasants. The people get so mustered up that they all hail the new rulers of the republican nation, the Seven Light Faith. Their victory is short-lived, however, as Gustav shows up in his fiery form. This time, he changes his form and morphs into a full-blown monster on two legs. Aoi and Shinobu try to destroy the red gem on his chest, but Gustav knocks them out. Aoi gives her all into one last attack and manages to crack the gem on his chest. Unfortunately, her sword breaks and she's blown away. Gustav makes his move towards Tsukasa, who was still standing on the platform. Tsukasa takes out his gun and keeps shooting the chest region repeatedly until a bullet hits it and takes it out. Before he disintegrates, Gustav gives Tsukasa a final look and calls him a weak man. He gives him a little more time and tells him he'll soon understand why he himself follows the Emperor so. After that, he disintegrates and dies. Several miles away from Findolf, Kaguya, Shura, and Hibari, three warrior ladies recognize the dawn of a new wind. A dude also joins them and smiles over the new world formation. Tsukasa wakes up the next day after having a nightmare about himself and colleagues. He remembers the words of Gustav and reminds himself that he's not as good a prodigy as the other six alongside himself. Nonetheless, he acts like the perfect man and gets down to eat some breakfast with his peers. He sets his eyes on some mayonnaise and digs in for a feast prepared by Winona and her father, Olga's house. Rue packs up a whole bunch of mayonnaise on her toast. Lirul and Ringo sit next to Tsukasa and offer him some food to eat. Tsukasa suddenly remembers his friends. He smiles and forgets all that Gustav said to him. Then he proceeds to tell his peers about the new policies of the new world they're creating before eating their breakfast.